Hi, my loves. In this video, I want to talk about a taboo, little big emotion called anger and why it's such an important emotion to be with and to listen to and to work with. I've had a lot of questions from both clients and even you guys commenting that, anger is very hard to access and there's a lot of numbness going on in these particular relationships. If you're struggling with narcissistic abuse, which is what I've been talking about lately, talk about other things like heartbreak and just general well-being, but this is my focus right now. And I'm really appreciating the feedback of how helpful some of these videos have been for you and also for some of my friends that have been sharing them with as well. So thank you for that feedback, and I feel like this is a good subject to touch on because it's a big one. That numbness that you feel, or the inability to feel your anger, is somewhat of a freeze or fawn response. Our healthy fight or flight response, which is how we respond to threats initially, it's there for a reason when we are experiencing threat. And if for some reason we're not allowed to fight or we're not allowed to flee, then we can go into freeze and fawning. And oftentimes, this is something that we learned as children, because you can't necessarily fight or leave an adult who is a threat to you. So, basic psychology, we tend to repeat the patterns that we were immersed in as children until we kind of like complete the loop, right? Our psyche tends to repeat these trauma patterns, and we end up in new relationships that repeat that pattern, but hopefully this time we can find an exit strategy or like complete the circle. But yeah, that's basic relational psychology, and I'd love to get into that on another video. But back to anger. Yeah, this emotion is a really intense one. It feels incredibly uncomfortable in the body. We want to get out of it at all costs. We want to discharge it. We want it to go away. It's a hot one. It feels like raking, grating. It's just not not a fun one to feel under the skin. So often, we go into suppression. I know for me, I used to go to humor, try to make light of it, or I would go immediately into sadness. That was an easier one to feel. However, what I learned in the long run around anger and suppressing it or avoiding it can have some very significant impacts on ourselves, our relationship with ourselves, how we interact with other people, and even our health. Or even our physical health. Okay, so the first reason that you really want to feel your anger and why it's important is that it is a strong indication that your boundaries have been violated. Okay, like this emotion is indicative that something is wrong in a moment. Now, there can be things it's a tricky one. You have to be very careful. Like if you have a lot of suppressed anger and a lot of internalized shame, then the littlest little thing can, incite all of this big anger that's been stored up underneath. We also see this, with the narcissistic people in our lives, like the littlest thing can incite all of this rage. And that is an unhealthy expression of this, right? So that's like where anger isn't necessarily, it's valid for that person, but it's valid because it's touching on something that they've been holding deep inside, and it's touching on a shame piece. Okay, so what and I know it's like this whole narcissistic relationship stuff, it's such a hall of mirrors, and it requires a lot of discernment and the ability to hold paradox at the same time. Okay, so forgive me if I can't get into all the nuance here because it would take forever to explore the whole fractal. But basically, just like you know the anger that you feel when someone crosses you or lies to you or cheats on you or says something really mean to you. Like, that anger that you feel is very valid. And oftentimes, if we are the people pleasing type, we will make excuses for that. We'll be like, oh, well, maybe I'm just being ridiculous, or maybe I'm just being oversensitive. Those things we need to be really careful about. I want to say that it's really good that you are bringing those questions up, but I do ask you to investigate further. Like, did that person say something that was mean? Did they actually do something to you that was not okay? Did they violate your boundary? And it'll be pretty easy to see. You might still have this inner mechanism that wants to deflect it or make excuses for them, but this is how we are entrained. So when you are in a relationship with a narcissistic person, you're not allowed to get angry at them for violating your trust or for being mean. you you get trained to take that anger back inside of yourself, right? And because anger is a dangerous thing to feel. If you call out a narcissistic individual and you express any anger, you know that that is going to be a bad scene for you. So we often try to keep our calm. I used to say this, and I recently had a client tell me, like, I feel like I'm just being tempered, and I feel like, my, what's the word, like, my capacity has grown so much. And it feels like a really virtuous thing, right? It's like, oh, my fuse is getting longer and longer and longer. Like, I've got so much stamina. I'm feeling so strong. And yeah, that's good. And also, in the long run, that can really have a damaging effect on you because you're actually suppressing and bypassing your own anger. And you're probably doing things like, finding all of these different communication tools and, adding things to your toolbox and using them. But then, like, that person is still going to keep jabbing at you until you react. And you have probably noticed yourself being more reactive than normal. When I was in that situation, that was the only time in my life that I ever slammed doors and screamed "fuck you" at somebody. Like, that is not a part of my character. And sometimes I would be like, wow, I feel like this person just really wants to set me off. Like, no matter how much pleading or like, hey, we're on the same side. Like, I love you. Let's talk about this in a good way. None of that would work. And come to find out years later that's how these relationships go. Like, that person wants to set you off so that when you react in your anger, they can belittle you and call you out as the horrendous person that they want you to believe you are. And when this happens, you are shamed for your rightful anger because this person has been abusive towards you and trying to set you off into anger, and then your natural response comes online and you get punished for it. So over time, you start to suppress your emotion of anger, which is there to tell you something is very wrong. Like, this is not okay. I'm being harmed here. As we know, suppressed anger begins to leak out in other ways. So if you've been in this situation for a while, you might start noticing how you might just be grumpy more often. You might get a little bit more snippy with your friends, or you might be isolating more. You might be, highly likely, you're more angry with yourself. And that's usually where it ends up going. Like, you're angry at this person for treating you in a certain way, and then you're punished and shamed for it. So then you learn to become angry at yourself for being angry. Okay, so what this does over time, not just the fact that the way that you will behave under these circumstances will start to affect your other relationships, with your friends and your family, other people close to you, they'll start to erode because you're just not yourself. Like, you can't be yourself when you're in this kind of relationship. So those relationships will be adversely affected, and then the relationship between you and yourself will take a huge hit. And while you may think that you're building this beautiful stamina, and in a way you are, but you're also punishing yourself, like you are being trained to self-punish. One of the things that I discovered in my own experience after years of this um, was that I started to develop autoimmune symptoms. And I started thinking about this like, oh my God, okay, so if the body's natural defense mechanism begins to attack itself and then creates an autoimmune disorder, like it feels like a very similar energetic as, you know, your natural defense mechanism towards harm, towards external harm, um, but beginning to self-attack, right? And as you know, I know it's a more like woo-woo concept for some people, but you know, scientific studies are showing this to be true, that you know, our emotional patterns begin to reveal themselves physically. Okay, so it's like things in kind of a more, like a less dense, like emotional field, like will at some point transmit into the body and show up as dis-ease, you know, unease, dis-ease. Like it just, it kind of compacts into the body after a while. So if you are neglecting or suppressing or avoiding or diverting or, you know, shushing away your anger, you do run the risk of developing, you know, physical challenges from this, physical disease and even autoimmune disorders. And the interesting thing around this is that a few years after I started asking this, there have been studies that are showing and suggesting that this is the case. And it is actually way more prevalent in women. Women tend to develop autoimmune disorders later in life. I think a lot of that has to do with how we are socialized. Now, this isn't across the board. I know plenty of people who aren't women who, you know, might have had a caregiver who didn't allow them to express healthy anger, and they developed an autoimmune disorder as well. However, like typical basic socialization, if people were socialized as a female, you know, anger isn't really accepted as feminine. You know, it's very unbecoming and very unladylike. Sadness is okay, weakness is okay. These other emotions are okay for, you know, girls, socialized girls to exhibit. Whereas, you know, boys, people socialized as boys are, you know, like that's a more acceptable, like male emotion. Now, I don't agree with this. I think like every human exhibits every emotion equally, but you know, we're talking about typical like society, like social norms and rules here. So it actually, it is a layer. It does have an effect on us, and this is why a lot of women have a harder time feeling their anger, because there is that layer of socialization on top of it. So if you are, you know, if you were socialized as a girl, like it's an extra, it's like an extra layer to heal through, to accept that, because you might have these, you know, old beliefs of, well, yeah, I'm not allowed to be angry because I'm just not allowed to. You know, your parents or caregivers, or you know, like the school, the church, like whoever was, you know, raising you, was probably not okay with you being angry. And to be honest, you know, no one's really when we're a kid and we're angry and we're throwing temper tantrums, and raw anger is very unpleasant to witness. I don't think that any of us come out of childhood unscathed around our anger. You know, we all get punished for it. Parents don't like it, and it's understandable. Temper tantrums are, you know, very intense. Anger is very intense. Like none of us like it. However, learning to be with and accept that emotion inside of yourself is an incredibly powerful and healing thing to do, especially on the other side of narcissistic abuse. Now, it's really tricky when you are in a relationship with a narcissistic person, because it's true, you don't want to express anger. That will get you into a lot of trouble. You also probably don't want to express grief or fear. Sometimes you don't even want to express joy. a lot of times these emotions, when they're expressed, they incite these really intense, like antagonistic responses in the other person. And so that can, obviously, it causes us to, yeah, suppress our emotions, doubt our emotions, feel like our feelings aren't okay. And yeah, anger is like such a big one. It's For me, it was the most suppressed feeling, and it was the most powerful when I uncovered it. And since anger is such an intense and uncomfortable thing to feel and also to witness, I mean, many of us have witnessed another person behave in really harmful ways in their anger. Like, we see it all the time. Like, it's a very scary emotion. And so when we feel it rising up in ourselves, it's very common to, try to move away from it or calm it down or compartmentalize it because it's terrifying. However, there are modalities that can help us to embrace and be with our anger and move it through in a really healthy way. One of the first and most helpful things that I found was somatic therapy, somatic healing, which is a beautiful therapeutic process where you feel what is in your body. You get to feel your emotions, but you take your mind out of it. So a lot of times in these situations, I mean, and just us humans in general are very mind driven. There's a lot of anxiety. We're in our heads. And it's very hard, especially when there's uncomfortable emotions, to actually descend into our body and feel what we're feeling, because it feels awful in there. It's hard to be in our skin when we are in a very uncomfortable, especially abusive situations. So it's easier to dissociate. However, when we are able to be in our body with the help of a therapist or a somatic coach that can help us to, you want to have someone who's trauma informed to do this, but to be with the sensations, like just the pure raw sensations, and help you to not get into the story. Because if we get into the mind story, then we can get into the meta emotions of feeling guilt or feeling fear or feeling angry that we are feeling angry. And I can stop that emotion from actually being felt and held fully. Our inner child and our inner being now really needs to feel validated and held in our healthy anger that is in response to, bad treatment. It's really important. So doing somatic therapies give us an opportunity to go in and safely be with the sensations in our body. And, it takes practice. It's not going to happen right away. But after a while, you get to come in and feel the sensations, feel the colors, the textures, the emotions as they are, and you don't have to, re-traumatize yourself by putting a story around it. You can just feel it. And once it's felt, then that part of you actually feels held. It feels paid attention to. It feels validated, and that allows the emotion to actually move and sometimes reveal something that's underneath it. There's a book called The Presence Process by Michael Brown. And I got into this after I had done some somatic therapy. It was amazing. I'm actually starting it again because there's always layers to move through, and it's been, about 5 years since I've done it. It's a 10-week meditation, and it's all about uncovering your old emotional stuff and even your present emotional stuff that you might be whatever. We're humans. We gotta live and bring home the bacon, so we're always moving around our emotions just in order to survive. But spending time going in and really feeling what we're feeling can do incredible things for your life, and especially your relationship to yourself. And it can also help you immensely become more in tune with your intuition and your more subtle knowing, and eventually help you to become extremely more discerning and more forgiving and compassionate with yourself. to be able to hold really good boundaries, and therefore, like, only allow the people who are really going to respect you and treat you well into your life. Like, it's so powerful. Um, Back to what I was saying, around, the 7th week of this, I confronted my anger. And I felt this inner little girl who is like she's so mad. She's so mad, like full of rage and hatred and all of those bad things that you're not allowed to feel, right? Especially if you're in a spiritual community. We're taught that, like, don't feel the anger, it's bad for you. And it's true, like feeling a whole lot of anger for a whole long time, that's going to cause liver issues and other things. But you also have to feel it. Like, you can't suppress it. And if you're able to feel it, like, it can move. And then it's almost like you off gas. As I was going into feeling this anger and just letting this part of me listen to her rage, I found this piece of myself that had been missing. I had a friend of mine tell me, like, it just seems like you have some self-worth things to work out. And I was like, yeah, I already did that. But, I would think about it. I'm like, God, I mean, I know that I am worthy of good love. I know that I don't deserve to be treated in these specific ways. So I guess subconsciously I must have some self-worth issues if this is a thing, but it doesn't make cognitive sense to me. But the emotional body isn't very cognitive. It's run by the subconscious. So yeah, the trippiest thing was like when I let this angry part of myself finally speak. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I was just like, okay, girl, like, let it rip. She was mad at my parents, my caregivers, all sorts of different mentors, teachers growing up, and mad at my adult self as well, because I didn't protect her from, a lot of really scary things. What I found was the self-worth, this pearl of self-worth, because she knew that she deserved so much more love and care than what she had received, right? And it was such a beautiful moment where I was like, wow, in the bowels of this dark dragon that society tells us, don't go there. It's bad. It's negative. It's like, that's like, the seed of evil pretty much, anger. By going deep in there, I found this part of myself that I had been missing, right? It's like when we are treated in ways that we know that we, like, we're not deserving of abuse, like, that's supposed to piss us off. And so oftentimes in going into our anger, we can find that beautiful, innocent place. And this is also the same reason why narcissistic people get so mad too. There's like a part of them that, they've internalized shame, right? So they're trying to, like, avoid that and deflect that. And it's just like, it's kind of the human, it's like the human wetiko, it's this human condition. And, just some of us have developed different coping mechanisms around it. Like if a narcissistic person was able to actually, like, get into that fragile part of themselves, then they would be able to do this as well. And I mean, I guess occasionally, sometimes they do, but typically they have this, like, don't be vulnerable at all costs construct around them, like their narcissistic persona. And oftentimes, if that becomes infiltrated or shattered in any way, then it feels like they're dying. It's like the ego death, but it's like so strong because they've invested so much of, like, themselves into it, because being that vulnerable self is just, it is so unsafe to them. So yeah. But when we are able to go into that very vulnerable space, that has been angry because of how that treatment has unfolded, beautiful things can happen. And after I found this in myself, I spent a good while, even a couple years, I would have to, like, go sit down and just feel it move through me. Like sometimes it felt like wolves just chewing on my ribs from the inside, and claws gashing at the inside of my skin, or I felt like I was burning up like a volcano, like a lava field, just it was it was intense. But after a while, like, you start to learn that the emotion itself isn't actually that scary. It's just a feeling, it's just a sensation. And when you're not running from that sensation anymore, and you can sit and feel it and know that you don't have to act on it, you don't have to be reactive to it. It can come with a message. Like, you feel it and you're like, okay, wow, I feel that. Like, okay, what do you want to tell me? And then there's actually a lot of wisdom often behind it, as far as like where it's coming from, what's not okay, like what you might need to, what boundaries you need to assert. Usually it's like you need to take a step back from a situation, or not engage in a specific way that's actually causing you harm, or sometimes, with a person. But to be honest, like, I didn't start diving into this until like maybe a year and a half after I was out of my relationship like that. Some of you I know are still in it, and that's way more tricky because you are still getting triggered by it every day. So the practice is to find a safe space if you can, and go into this and start feeling it. Now, I would definitely, if you can, find a therapist, find a somatic therapist, especially someone who specializes in narcissistic abuse recovery. That's very important because they're going to help you dig through that whole crazy quagmire that's going to come down, like the whole like self-debasing stuff, the self-gaslighting stuff. Like, you want somebody who can hold you and coach you through that and understand all the different psychological mechanisms that are going to like come into play while you are feeling these feelings. And they're also going to be able to help you, like, hold you through these processes. Internal family systems is really helpful as well as a therapeutic modality. And if you don't have access to that, if you can find a place for yourself, just 15 minutes a day, and hold your heart, like wherever your anger is, just hold it in your body and say, I'm here. You belong. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Another piece to this is that titration is very important, because if you are loaded up with anger, that, like, just opening that up can also feel really traumatic. So you want to go easy on yourself. Like, feel it for a little bit, and if it becomes too overwhelming, then like, okay, maybe step back a little bit. It's okay to get in your car and scream and rage. You can throw a temper tantrum. You can like shake. Whatever you can do to feel the feelings that are there and to validate them for yourself. Even if it's just holding yourself. I spent a lot of my time feeling the rage burn through my body. I would just hold myself in a fetal position, or even in a meditative, like, sitting up position, just feeling like a volcano. That was really helpful to do on my own. And what happened after a while was that I could feel, like, even random feelings of anger or rage. I was like, oh wow, I feel like really angry right now. Like, my whole body feels like it's on fire. But I didn't have to, like, I didn't feel like I had to run from it or suppress it. It was just there. Sometimes it would, have a message there, and sometimes I was like, oh, well, maybe this is just something from long ago that's just moving through. But having a healthy relationship with that emotion could do wonders for your life. And it can also, obviously, where we're trying to get to is, protect ourselves from harmful people and situations. And also, like, just validating ourselves and keeping ourselves and our body healthy. Your anger is important. It's not something to be shunned or afraid of. If you do have anger management issues, then yeah, finding someone who can support you through that could be like incredibly helpful. It might be too big to go at it alone. I know for me, I needed some therapeutic help to even help me access it, to even, help me witness it, to help me just just have support to know that it's okay to even feel that in the first place, and to reflect to me when I was deflecting it. There's no shame in that at all. So, yeah, definitely get the support that you need and just keep loving yourself. Have so much compassion for yourself. You've been through so much. We've all been through so much. And if you're dealing with a narcissistic person in your life, and you've been, getting stronger and tempered and choking on that, like, please find some support to help you become whole again, because if you're splitting that part of yourself off, we can become very unintegrated. When we become whole, we heal, and yeah, you got this. Your anger matters. All of your feelings matter. And yeah, I hope this is helpful for you. God bless you on your journey with all of this. And yeah, I will see you in the next video.